Well, I'm joined now by Brian Kahn, professor of horticulture. Brian was involved with some of the seeding research with the basil that Neil's presented. Brian, even in the best laid research plots, we find that weather tends to interrupt sometimes, and the sweet corn kind of demonstrates some of those problems that weather can impose on us. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Kim. We've had way too much rain this year, and it's been so much rain and so much cloudy weather that the corn hasn't grown as vigorously as it normally does. Plus, it's kept us out of the field, so we're one nitrogen top dressing behind from where we normally are. So while these aren't hungry for nitrogen, they might be a little bit taller plants if we'd been able to put a little more on.
Okay, and we're going to look at another crop that's been affected by weather, but in a little bit different way.
Right.
Well, this is a zucchini trial, variety trial that you're conducting.
Right.
You kind of share some of the little bit about this research.
This is another trial, Kim, that's been affected just like the corn that we looked at by too much rain.
Okay.
The plants are doing okay, but again, they're not as big as we'd like to see them, and we need to get in a couple of days and put another nitrogen top dressing on because it's been solid mud, and we haven't been able to get in here.
Okay. And some of that excess rain, has that caused any other problems with your zucchini?
Well, it's not just from the actual growing of the plant, but here's what we hope to see when we're growing zucchini is a nice, well-formed, marketable fruit. Another problem we get when we don't have enough rain, when we have too much rain, another problem that we get is lack of pollination, because the honeybees don't like the rain any more than you and I.
Yeah.
And so if it's raining, they're not going to be working the field, and then you get poor set, and instead of that nice elongated zucchini, we get something like this, and you can see the developing seeds up here where it was pollinated, but down here it wasn't adequately pollinated, and all you've got is this little turnip-shaped, non-marketable fruit.
Okay, so you get real irregular shape.
Very irregular shape, and unfortunately not marketable, and it's strictly weather-related.
Okay. Do you want to share a little bit about the kind of research that's going on in this plot?
This is just a general variety trial like many of the ones that we do. We're looking for varieties that are best adapted to Oklahoma conditions. We've got 12 different kinds of green zucchini out here, 12 cultivars, and they all have some kind of virus resistance. So that's another thing we're going to look at besides yield, is to see if virus moves in, how does the resistance hold up.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at one more crop before we finish up here.
Sounds good.
Well, this is another variety trial with tomatoes, and I think what's interesting here, you have a little bit different style of staking them.
Yeah, there's several different ways that tomatoes can be supported, Kim. This is the most common commercial system in the United States, and it's called stake and weave. And if you look at it, you can kind of see why. Every two plants, you've got a stake. In this case, it's a metal rebar. And then we've taken this plastic baler twine and we've woven it in and out around these plants, crossed over in between, to help keep them up and support it off the ground. Now eventually these plants are going to grow a little bit taller. We'll have to put another string on, and so forth.
And now, what's the advantage of using this method of staking?
Well, there's two main ways that tomatoes are kept up off the ground commercially. One is to put an individual concrete reinforcing wire cage over each individual plant. That saves you a lot of labor initially, because once the tomato's caged, it's good, but it's harder to pick because it gets very bushy inside the cage. The fruit are hard to see. This system, the advantage is, well, the disadvantage is you have to come through with hand labor periodically and put on more strings. But the advantage is, look how exposed the fruit are. They're right there, they're easy to see, and we'd like to see a little more foliage cover over the fruits. This is another difficulty we've had with the weather this year, but it's a lot easier to pick with this system.
Okay, and something certainly that a homeowner could try.
Homeowner, no reason they can't do it. If they've got more than just a few tomatoes, if they've got a fairly substantial row, certainly worth doing.
Okay, now something else that you've seen in this field is a disease that was quite a problem a few years back. The curly top virus.
Yeah, in 2003, this disease called BCTV, or beet curly top virus, really devastated tomatoes throughout Oklahoma. It was so severe that it completely took out our variety trial here at Bixby, and it was a problem for commercial and home producers across the state. Most years, fortunately, just like this year, you only see it sporadically in the field. But if you were to see an infected plant, this is what it would look like. You can see, comparing to the ones we were just looking at that were nice and green and healthy, this is stunted. The leaves are really rolled up. If you look closely at the backs of those rolled leaves, you can see that the veins have a purple color. And that's another diagnostic tool for telling that that's the particular problem. You can also see that the fruit are very small and stunted, and eventually this plant is just going to shrivel up and be completely worthless. Once it's infected, that's it.
Okay, and so with viral diseases, prevention is the key. And one thing we could do with tomatoes is to use a row cover.
That's about all you can do for prevention, because this particular virus is carried by the beet leafhopper. It's an insect-borne virus, and it's really difficult or impossible to keep that leafhopper suppressed with sprays, even if you wanted to try. It's going to blow in at some point from out of state, come in. You can't predict when that happens. And all it takes is, you know, one bite on the plant, so to speak, and it's got the disease. So if you've got a home garden situation and you've just got a few plants, protecting them from the first day that you put those transplants out with a row cover would keep the leafhoppers off. Otherwise, take your chances, and in most years, you know, you'll just be hit or miss and maybe lose a plant here and there. We don't want to see another 03.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for coming.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.